So thank you all for being here tonight. This is Seth Hopkins speaking for those of you who are not on the picture phones. I'll call the Brandon Select Board Budget Committee workshop meeting to order. It's 6:01. Mr. Atherton, can you take a couple of notes about times and things of that nature? Thank you. So we do have an actual agenda. The agenda is to adopt the agenda, have a budget workshop, and then adjourn. Is there any motion from the board relative to adopting that agenda?
I'm afraid I don't have a copy of the agenda.
It was in the same email that Dave sent all the budgets for the departments. It was toward the bottom.
I see it. Yes. Okay. Thanks. Sorry. Yeah. I move to adopt the agenda.
Excellent. Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Second from, so motion by Giles, second by Bailey. Any discussion, any changes to be made? I don't expect so. All in favor of adopting the agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That's 4-0 unanimous. Great. So I want to thank Barry and Tony and Jan for being here from the Budget Committee after several years for some of you and a few years for others. And this is a great help to the Select Board to have your input and your eyes on this process. And it's helped us greatly, I think, in presenting it to the voters. So thank you all for serving in this way. And I want to thank Jackie for being here also to give us current numbers and be able to make the adjustments as we go. That's always been helpful. And thanks to the members of the public who are here tonight. To Brent, I see on the phone. Thank you for participating. And Brent, we're going to run this workshop style. So this goes for the Budget Committee and the board, and for the members of the public who are here and the town staff. Just chime in whenever you want. There's no formal structure to this, except that Dave had suggested we lead off with the police and then go into administration, zoning, and the assessor if there's time. So the only person I didn't thank so far was Chief Brickell. So thanks, Chief Brickell, for being here to discuss your department's budget with us. And are there any other comments of a general nature anybody would like to make, or questions anybody would like to ask about the process or about the format of tonight's meeting or the other workshop sessions before we get into individual departments that we'll look at?
Yeah, Seth?
Yeah, Brent.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear.
Is it possible for me to get the budget worksheet in some fashion? I just request that from Dave.
Yeah, I'll email it to you right now, Brent. There's about six attachments. There's about 6 attachments on it.
Thank you, Dave.
To the details email?
Yes, please.
Okay, I'll send it right over.
Thank you.
That's great. Thanks for bringing that up. Does anyone else need them, or everybody else got them as part of the Budget Committee and Select Board email? Dave, thanks for sending those out. Thank you for splitting them up into individual departments. I think that's helpful as far as managing stuff. So if we could we lead off with the police department budget? This one is 3 pages, but really the 3rd page is just kind of a balancing of the revenue against the expenditures. So I only printed off the first 2 pages. And Dave, did you want to be the presenter, or did you want to ask Chief Brickell to do that for his department? Or
I guess I can just introduce it.
Yeah, thanks.
You know, I'll give it just a brief overview. We felt that this budget seems to be getting easier, but we definitely have streamlined it a little bit more, and you know, we're getting things together quicker. So and every department's been great on this. So that's why we have everything but one department right now that we can actually review. So yeah, I guess we figure we got Chief done, so he doesn't have to worry about missing any bowling for the rest of the season, and we'll go from there. Sound good?
Thanks, Dave. Chief Brickell, do you want to go through it in general senses or line by line, or whatever you feel like is helpful would be great.
Well, I think first I'd just like to start off by saying, and I apologize, I didn't think about, and maybe you've already thought about this, sending just the memo that I sent about certain budget issues to the members of the Budget Committee, because I sent that to Dave I don't know if they were given the copy of that or not.
I don't think it went out with that. I'll send it out right now.
Okay, thank you. And I don't know if the memo generated any questions or any discussion that you'd like to have. I'm happy to just go through the budget issues if you want, or if you want to touch on any of the things that I mentioned in the memo.
Is that a memo that the board got? Tim?
I thought you all did. It only has,
What would the date have been about?
that was November 9th. And there were only 4 specific issues. They were related to tasers, dispatching fees, vehicles, and video.
I don't believe the select board got that either. I do have a memo from you today about dispatch specifically, but I don't think it was more like you were sending information from the state along with some comment. I don't think
Right.
any of us have seen something we're talking about with 4 different points.
That's not the same. And I'm sorry, this was, we were required to send it to Dave, so I just gave him a couple of 4 different points of issues that really were not specifically related to budgetary concerns that I have now, but things that I'm looking at for the future that we're trying to take care of so that there's not issues in the future.
Yeah, I
Thank you.
just saw that. Just give me 1 second and I'm
Sure.
gonna send this thing out to all you guys right now.
Is Bill still on?
No, it's me. I let Jan in once, so
Oh, that's
let
okay.
me just send this email and then I'll let her in.
And if it's easier, I can go through the budget issues first, and then if there's the issues on the memo that you want to touch on afterwards, that's fine as well.
That might make sense. So Dave's gonna send along that memo that you prepared
Okay.
and let Jan into the meeting. And
And
while Dave's doing that, why don't you go ahead and start with the actual budget part, and then we'll get to the other part.
so my budget, are you folks looking at the dollar amount, or are you looking at a percentage amount budget? Just so I know which sheet I should go off of.
So what I have, Chris, and what I believe everybody has is like 6 columns, and the rightmost column has a percent, but all the other columns are dollars. It's
Okay,
budget for 2020, the actual for 2020, the budget for 2021, the year-to-date for 2021, and the proposal for 2022.
so the proposal you're looking at is really the difference in percentages over the overall budget. Is that correct?
It includes that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when you look at revenues, right off the bat, the only difference in revenues that I made to the department was the where you typically put in an estimate for a traffic ticket revenue. And I reduced that from $5,500 to $4,000 simply because of the fact that due to a lot of COVID-related stuff and part of our operating policy, we are not making routine, regular motor vehicle stops in contact with the public. When we see egregious violations and issues that are of public safety concern, that's where we're making motor vehicle contact. So the regular routine, you see a headlight out, a tail light out, somebody not using a directional, things like that. Those specific traffic contacts are not being made. So and again, this is an estimate, but of traffic ticket revenue, I've just reduced that knowing that we're not making as much personal contact with motorists on the roadway. So that's really the only revenue change that I made in there. And then, this is boring and simple, and I'm happy to answer any questions, but typically our budget is, as I do every year, I try to keep it exactly where it should be, raise it for the amounts that I absolutely have to. And I put the inputs in where I have input. So I don't touch anything with salaries based on the union contract and what's been decided upon with the town already. So as I get into mine, where I reduced, my first line item was in professional development, and I tried to reduce that by not a great amount, but at least $1,000. And it's simply because of the fact that a majority of training that I've tried to send people to has now either non-existent or it's online training. And some of that training is not as beneficial when it's online, and it's not as useful as far as I'm concerned with the training that the officers need to be able to have, or topics that they are interested in getting training in. And a lot of training has not been available to us this past year just due to COVID. So I reduced that somewhat so that if things start to tick up, we'll be able to send more people to the training that I'd like to send them to. But the reality is I don't think that I'll use that budgeted amount. So I reduced that to something that I thought would be a reasonable amount, just reduce that by $1,000. I reduced the service contracts minuscule by $500, but there is some talk of changing the two systems that we use for information right now. One being Spillman and the other being Valcor, and we use both right now. There is talk from the Commissioner of Public Safety that the state is going to go strictly to Valcor, which is what we use as our primary database and CAD related system. We have kept both because the state and the state dispatching system still uses Spillman. So that's why we still have that budgeted in there. So I've reduced that in anticipation that that is going to change and go to Valcor. That was part of our service contracts. Fuel is where I made the biggest adjustment in our budget, and fuel is it's a worrisome thing for me because we have been for the last few years anyway using a bulk tank that is something that I don't have control over the bidding for, or the price of fuel and how it's delivered to the town. And it sounds like in conversations that I've had with Jackie that the difference between going to the system that we used to use, which was a credit card based, that we could go to either Jiffy Mart or Champlain Farms or any of the service stations that use that system, the gas prices are typically 1 to 2 cents more per gallon by using that. And I think Jackie and I looked at the budget numbers, and it ended up being like less than $200 a year if we went back to the system that we used to have. But that would also save the record keeping that we do, the fuel deliveries, which have been somewhat sporadic, where we've run out of fuel a couple of times in the bulk tank. And most of all, I think Elaine's time that she does to actually go through all of the numbers, make sure that the gallons coincide with what we use and that there's no abuse of the fuel anywhere there. We're certainly spending more than that in Elaine's time and effort to take care of those figures. So in any regard, our fuel usage has been down because our officer numbers have been down, and also because of COVID, again, having gone to where it is, and gas prices being down. So I've reduced that to what I think is reasonable, but still safe for a margin in the event that gas prices go back up or we end up using more fuel than anticipated. But for me, that's a substantial cut in bringing that down to $4,000. So that was my other change in there, and that's really the only changes to my budget that you're going to see. I kept everything else exactly where it has been from years prior. Again, the only thing that I don't really have the control over is the contract changes and whatever happens with healthcare and Beamers and those types of things.
That is great. Thank you for leading us through that. Yeah, go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, I was just seeing the memo that Dave just emailed out to us that is really interesting. And I thought it would be useful if you might just briefly talk us through each of the 4 points.
Sure. I'm happy to do that. So taser replacement. So taser, as I think most of you know, it's a conducted electrical weapon. It's a less than lethal type of weapon that 3 of us carry within the department. We purchased them several years ago, but the latest version that we have, which is called an X26P, we bought 5 years ago on a assurance plan. Because of the expense of them, it was broken out over a 5-year period. I paid that contract price off early, and by joining in that assurance plan, what that entitled us to was, at the end of the 5-year contract, we can replace the current taser that we have with 3 new tasers at no cost to the department. or we could upgrade to the latest model, which was supposed to be very minuscule in an increase in cost to the department. When I got the actuaries from, well, Taser, which is now called Axon, the hidden costs were really prohibitive in my mind. That, you know, it ended up being over $5,700 just to replace them. And if I replaced all of them and the equipment that would be needed, it would be over $8,400. The current version that we have to the latest device that's available, it goes from what we have now as a single cartridge fire device to a double cartridge fire device. In the event that you fire at your target and you miss or only one prong hits, you have a second charge that you can do. It also gives what we call a display arc without having to remove a cartridge, but it would also include retraining of the officers from the device that they're used to a new device. It would be more costly in trading different holsters that would have to be got and different cartridges. So the overall reasoning for staying with what we have is the training is the same. We know what we have. It's a good, reliable device. They will be brand new devices. That the only thing that I will have to come up with for funding will be the warranty costs for the next 5 years, and that totals a little over $1,000 for the future 5 years. So by sticking with that, we will have brand new devices after December 15th, even, or it'll be the beginning of next year. That will last the department for another 5 years with the warranties that I will have paid off. So there won't be any costs associated for that for the next 5 years. Dispatching fees is another story. Dispatching fees is something that, as you know, is a fluctuating target. The costs that I've mentioned in my memo here were based on prior memos that were issued by the Commissioner of Public Safety, which again, he has to get approved by the legislature. And I know Representative Shaw has been instrumental in making sure that he holds the commissioner to the fees that come out of that and how these fees are implemented over time and when they're implemented over time. So there was a push for year 3 for all these towns to be paying the full boat. And I know because of conversations that I've had with the commissioner and that Representative Shaw has had with the commissioner, that was a timeline that just wasn't going to be acceptable, not only to us, but many municipalities within the state. So it's going to be phased in over time, and that exact figure is still not determined, which is why I forwarded that email to you that I received today, because it gives you their draft on what they're looking at, and they're looking for input from anybody and those that are going to be affected by that. So clearly that's an opportunity for the board and or the town manager. I'm in regular conversations with the Department of Public Safety about that. So any other input that you have would be greatly appreciated in the dispatching fees. The vehicles I mentioned simply because I know, Tim, that you have an interest, and we've had conversations very briefly and just scratching the surface on electric vehicles and what their use or potential could be for patrol vehicles for the town. And I very sincerely tried to look at articles that I could find positively looking at electric vehicles, and there's not enough information for me to really make an informed decision yet. I've spoken to a sheriff in Windham County who has just taken delivery of a Tesla. He's doing it on a pilot project, and he's a very forward-thinking individual, so I respect his opinions, and he's told me what he finds, like things that I thought would be problematic, such as how do we hook all of our electronic devices to this electric vehicle, and he explained to me the separate energy system and battery. Go ahead, Tim.
Well, did you see the 30-minute YouTube that I sent from Westport, Connecticut?
I
Because that
did.
actually was an exhaustive description from a police chief. It was really persuasive in how much he thought the car saved them a lot of money. And I think that's just why I wanted to bring it up in front of the group, so to speak, because I don't think everybody else has seen it.
I did look at it, and I've aside from that, I looked at other articles, and I've also I've talked to two people that actually use them and have them trying to use them for police services. The problem with them, if you try to use it as a patrol vehicle, is that everything so far really has to be custom fit, as far as if you have a cage, if you have a rifle, if you have laptops mounted in there, the types of things that you would normally see in a police vehicle for patrol have to be pretty much retrofitted. But it wasn't so much those things that concerned me as it was ground clearance and winter driving in Vermont. And I know that you have one and you've driven it in Vermont in winter driving. I don't know that you would drive it in the same circumstances that we might for police use. And I just don't have anybody that has used it for police type of work to know how does that work in, for instance, pursuit mode. How does it work on, I hear it's great on ice, on black ice, but I don't know that. And the ground clearance is something that worries me a little bit. But again, those are things that are minor. What concerns me more is when I look at the costs of maintenance that I could save as opposed to maintenance that I might have to replace, such as battery expenses. Granted, they've got a 5-year warranty for the battery life, but when the batteries are looking at $5,000 and up, that concerns me. And service, there is no Vermont service technician. The closest one would be Mass.
No, actually, there's something called a Tesla Ranger, and they do 90% of all the service remotely. They come to you.
Mhm.
And so you only have to go to Tesla for rare things. But I don't want to bog this all down. I appreciate that you're considering this. And
Right.
it seems like do I understand we aren't getting a police car this year?
Correct.
Yeah. And so we'll continue this conversation. I think it's very productive. And
I would like to have a deeper conversation with you specifically about those vehicles, only because there's a lot that I don't know, and way too many on both sides that I'd like to dispel some of the myths. And I do understand that most of the upgrades and any services, mostly it's a software service. So it's really a plug-in and you get whatever the update is that it's supposed to be. But there
yeah.
are some mechanical things that would concern me that I'd have to look at.
Well, just for the benefit of this group, because I know this is about budgeting, and we're likely to be the same group next year when we come back. The YouTube from Westport, because Westport, Connecticut actually has a Tesla, and they actually worked with Tesla and the company that outfits police cars to standardize how to convert a Tesla to a police car. So that way, they had a couple of links in the film that I sent you that actually allows you to get standard lights, interior computer system, and even that cage in the back for if you choose to have that. So they do have some standardization that they're working towards. It's still in the beginning phases.
Okay.
We'll
And so the fourth item that I really had, which is something that I struggle with on a regular daily basis, is video storage and looking at cloud storage. So we have, I think I should know this, but I don't. I think we only have 2 cruisers left that have in-car camera systems. In-car camera systems are about $6,000, and they have a high rate of malfunction at this point, unless you upgrade to wireless systems where they remotely upload videos, and they're super expensive to get into. We have always stayed with the original version of the WatchGuard in-car video system that we had, until we went to body cameras several years ago. And we did that with the accessibility of grants through the Vermont Leagues of Cities and Towns. And I have been very pleased mechanically and service-wise, and with the product as to how it works and how it's operated. It's a very simple device, very rugged and very reliable. And when I've had issues, I call them up, they send me a replacement, I send them back the old one, and we're good. The problem with video storage is that we have a ton of video. Every officer carries a body camera. Any interaction that they have with the public is recorded. And so as you can imagine, each time they go off their shift, they dock it and it uploads it to a separate standard hard drive that I have, which is separate because it's evidence. Any video that we have is potential evidence and it can't be tampered with. So it goes through my computer only to a separate hard drive, and all of our video is stored there. We have plenty of storage on, it's a redundant drive. It's got 5 hard drives connected to it. The problem with it is that aside from the amount of video that I have to review to make sure that policy is being followed and our interactions with the public are being what they should, it requires that I have to, anytime that we have a case that goes to court or somebody has a request for public information, I have to pull that video and then I have to burn it to a DVD. And when I do that for any criminal cases, I have to do 2 copies, one for the defense and one for the prosecution. So it's not only time consuming, but it's a process that I have to go through in order to do that. And only I can do that because it's on a separate drive related to me. So I've started looking at cloud storage, and the company that we use, which is WatchGuard, has 2 types: a true cloud storage where everything is managed in the cloud, but it's really costly and I need separate hardware to actually pull the video off because it's pulled off in increments because of the size of the video before it's sent to the cloud. And so I've been looking at a kind of intermediate way to deal with that. And I have our computer IT people now talking with the people at WatchGuard to see exactly how we would do this, but there is a way that I could do it with a one-time software purchase of $1,000 that pulls video off without any additional type of hardware that I would need, sends it to the cloud in pieces, and then what happens is anytime that I need to produce it for public records request, anytime I need to produce it for court or for any other purpose, I can email a link to that person that requires that. It's a secure link and it goes directly to that person. So they then have the video because they have access to it that I'm giving them. And it costs me $150 per device, and we have 8 cameras. So we're looking at, $1,200 a year for me to be able to manage it much better and reduce the cost that we would be doing of time and DVDs that we're burning for people constantly. So that's just something that I'm looking into. We'll manage that within the budget numbers that we have. It's nothing that I need to increase. It's just something that I wanted to make you aware of that I'm looking at, so that beyond me, somebody else is going to have an easier way to be able to store, manage video and get it out to the people that it needs to get to. So that was really the only purpose of my memo, was to highlight those few things. And if you guys had any questions about any of that, or guys and gals, sorry, Jan.
So that's great. Thank you for leading us through that, Dave. Thanks for the copy so we could follow along. So Chief, can you just confirm for me where they are at with dispatch fees? Like, so the budget year that we're considering, is July 2021 through June 2022. Are the state, what you're saying is the state's not going to phase it in for this budget year? That's not year 1?
That's correct.
Okay.
From all the conversations that I've had, and because towns have not had the opportunity to budget for a cost that they don't know what it's going to be yet, this has been kind of pushed back, and that's why you're seeing right now a lot of these draft proposals, because they want to get it on the table and they want to start making some income for this.
Okay, great. And my other question is just, can you give us a situational update? There's a line on the revenue and a line on the expense for the SRO officer. Can you just kind of tell us what the situation is with the school district and that position and all that kind of stuff?
Sure. So as you're probably aware, due to the change in law enforcement practices and all racial equity topics, there's a big discussion. In fact, the Vermont libraries have decided that they're not supporting school resource officers in schools. It's going along the conversation of, by having a police officer in the school, it's a pipeline for people to get into the criminal justice system, which I have a very fundamental disagreement with that argument, and that's not how we practice our SRO program. And And it doesn't, nothing would point in that direction whatsoever. Having said that, the school supports it, and the school requested that we have an SRO at the school if available. So we had several contract discussions with the superintendent's office and with the town manager, and I essentially told them that unless the school was paying the full bill for what it actually cost for my officer, including salary and benefits, then there was really no way that we could do it, because we couldn't afford to take him off the road unless that salary was being paid for. And that's where we're at with this. So the fee that you're seeing in there is the officer's salary and benefits included in that billing that goes to the school, and we're doing that monthly now. And currently, there is a cap on it that there's an amount not to exceed, but the school changed from when we originally started from full-time to they're doing 4 days a week. So John, who is our school resource officer, is there Monday and Tuesday. There is no school in session on Wednesday, and then they're back Thursday and Friday. And anything that he is doing additional after school in the way of any type of athletic games that he attends, any type of basketball games, if they're happening in the future, or anything that they want him over and above what he works per day, is charged at his overtime rate, but it comes out of the money that their maximum amount is for. So when they run out of money, we pull him back into patrol. And I don't think that we will run out of that, given the way things are going now. And I'm not so sure that we'll even have a complete school year, given COVID. Maybe Tony could answer better to that than I could, but it's a true cost reflect of what it actually costs us for the officer that's there and his salary and benefits.
And is it working in the way that, maybe a year ago we were talking about it was going to allow the town to have a full-time or to recruit a full-time position, and the school year, the officer would be funded as the SRO by the school district, and the town would be kind of using this officer's position to cover vacations and so forth during has it played out that way, or is it not going to, or is the plan changed?
It has not played out that way. The plan hasn't changed. It has not planned out, has not come out that way, and likely won't. So we had a person that we had anticipated filling the 7th vacancy that we have. And that would have put us in a spot where we could have actually functioned with patrol and had somebody at the school, and it wouldn't not have been much of an issue. What we had hoped to do was, had we filled that 7th position, the real hope was to take the money that was being paid for from John's position at the school to hire an 8th, which would get us back to where we were several years ago, where we were actually providing 24-hour coverage. And that we haven't even gotten back to the 7th person yet. And there again, one of the things I think I struggle with most with, and it's not just me, it's statewide and it's nationwide, is the recruitment of officers and trying to recruit, people from marginalized communities that don't normally apply to positions in law enforcement, and trying to get a diverse population into law enforcement that will help us serve our communities better. We really need a full-time human resources person to go to recruit to college campuses, to have a huge online presence, a better way of being able to reach out to more people than we're reaching out. We were the first agency in this state to go to Police App, which was an online, it's a nationwide application process where anybody interested in law enforcement can look up any agency nationwide. They apply online, they pay a fee to that Police App, which is a very minimal fee, and then they have access to all of the agencies that are on there. We've gotten several from there, and part of the problem that we have is a lot of the people that have applied have come from out of state. There's quarantining issues, there are testing issues that we're not able to do with COVID. So we're kind of maneuvering through that process, in addition to not having a lot of interest in general in the profession of law enforcement.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question. Just struck me that, and it certainly has to do with budgeting. Is it John Butterfield who is the SRO?
Yes, that's correct.
And if we're down an officer because we are having trouble retaining and finding new officers, it seems like it's an interesting question whether John Butterfield's better serving us in the school or whether he'd be better serving us in other places in the department. And it would certainly change how we pay for him, because clearly if he weren't in the school, we'd have to be paying for him. But I'm just wondering if you've weighed that option, that awareness that we're actually choosing to put him in the school rather than putting him into the lineup of regular officer work.
I do, and it's really a balance, Tim, of we have a little bit of a loss of hourly coverage that I would prefer to have myself, but at the same time, the school is part of our community, and all of those kids are part of our community, and to have someone there that interacts with them on a regular basis, that knows family issues that are going on or kids that are having troubles at school, those relationships help in our community even when they're not in school. So I think it far outweighs the benefits of pulling him out of the school for a simple few hours of coverage, or somebody not working some overtime because they can't have a day off because they need to cover a certain shift. I think it's more important that we have that connection with the school, and specifically because they want us there.
Okay.
Other folks with comments and questions for the chief? I do want to commend you for keeping, you hold the line, year after year. This is a very stable department budget. And in a lot of ways, it makes explaining the budget to the town meeting easier. It makes, it helps people to understand that, we're kind of as a community come to a consensus over a number of years, not just at a moment, about what we are able to commit for financing for our police department. So thank you for doing what you do here. And we do understand all the collective bargaining and the various contracts and stuff like that. Dave, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but where are we in contracts? Are we about due to renegotiate? Seems like we're must be at the end of year 2 or 3, or getting into year 3.
I haven't heard anything from the police union. And we have some minor stuff to discuss with the other union. So
Okay.
I haven't heard, yeah, nothing's been open with the PD union yet.
Okay.
I think Jan had a question too, so.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see that. I'm sorry, Jan.
That's okay. I was just wondering how the guys like their new uniforms that you got them last year, and then what's in special wages? Those are my only 2 questions.
So they are loving them much more than they like the other uniforms. These are much more convenient, where in the old uniforms, you have your vest underneath your uniform and you can't take your shirt off and take your vest off and then put your shirt back on. They're required to wear it when they're on duty. These are simply, you can pull the sides down. If you're in the office and you're doing paperwork, you can take the vest off, and it's almost like having a t-shirt on while you're not out on the road and you're not in the public. So they greatly appreciate the difference. As far as the specials line goes, so I don't know if that should be maybe changed to reflect what we call, but specials are part-time officer wages. So one of the ways that we can get people into full-time law enforcement is there is still what we have a level 2 training, which is part-time, what used to be called part-time training. And it's a way to get somebody a minimum level of certification in a very short period of time. They go to the academy for 2 weeks, and then they come out and they work under the direction of a field training officer, but they get some experience. They get to see if it's something that they want to do, and it's at a much lower rate. So we can bring somebody on, use that money to pay them. It's like a part-time rate without benefits and insurance and all that.
Thank you.
Tim, did you have your hand up?
No. No, sorry, nothing.
All right, Tony, thanks.
Chris, just a quick question. Does the budget reflect for the officer salary the potential for the union change?
The budget that's in there is reflected by, Jackie does the calculations based on what the percentages are in the union contract. So what has been negotiated already is in those changes in the budget. Correct, Jackie, right?
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
so I estimate, because the police union is much different than the other one. They have this regular percentage, and then they also base the rest of it on, I forget, some other moving target number that comes out. So it's not like an easy, like they get a 3% raise every year that you can automatically budget for. So I just do an automatic estimation and hope it covers everything. So
And while we're in that realm and Jackie's here, so Jackie, the health insurance works on calendar years. So what we have set into next year's column is just this year's health insurance premium without any change. And we don't know the change until too late, right?
let me get to that other sheet.
I can probably help her in that answer.
sure.
Yeah,
So, because we have historically seen the health insurance increases, rather high, like we'll just use 10% as a number. And we had a 1% increase this year. So the projection from last year to cover that, anticipation for the calendar year versus the fiscal year has totally covered what we would do for the following year and then some. So we're actually sort of ahead of it because of our projection for last January was, looking at another 10% increase as usual, and it was 9% less. So we're a little ahead of the game on that right now, which is good.
So you're saying the calendar year that we're in now, the health insurance increase came in much lower than we budgeted for this time last year? No.
The calendar year that we'll be going into in January
That's
is much less.
That's much less than, okay.
So our anticipation last year at this time to cover this fiscal year, come January 1st will be less.
So you have already, the next calendar year's health insurance increase is a known thing.
Yeah, we had the 1% thing. It came out to all of us, I don't know, a month or so ago. I think
yeah.
it was.
So next year's rates went up 1.5%. And I normally budget for at least a 5% increase.
Well, that's welcome news. That's great.
Yeah.
Other questions or comments on the police budget? We can always come back to it, but Chief, thank you so much for leading us through that and for the other topics in the memo so that we're aware of those.
Anytime, and if there's things that come up after your meeting, or, I know Dave will contact me or shoot me an email on things if there's further explanation that you need.
Right. So tonight we also we've got some time. We planned for these to go, not later than 8, and I think we could probably pretty easily get through the administration department, Dave. Dave had suggested administration, zoning, and assessor if we have time. So if that's cool with everybody, I think I might just turn it over to Dave and lead through it in that order, where you start with your department and then zoning and then administration. Is that reasonable?
Works for me, Seth.
Okay, please, thanks.
I'll say my goodbyes then.
Thank you,
Thank
Chris.
you.
So my budget's pretty close to last year. We did look at 3% salary increases like we have in the past. All of the other health insurance, as we just discussed, so that's a very small increase. Life and disability went down. All the other there. So a couple lines we've changed, like travel and expense didn't change because I don't really foresee us going too far this year again. Professional development, I dropped that one down again for the same reason that, we're not having really paid classes anymore. Everything's via Zoom, so they're usually free through the league. A couple lines here. Office supplies is down 14% because Elaine is super thrifty. So we've got her browbeating everybody to get the best price, and it really seems to be working. So service contracts, these are the ones that went up. This is for ongoing contracts, whether it's for computer services or I'm trying to think of what was the other ones in there. Jackie and I just talked about it and I can't seem to remember. Do you remember, Jackie? We go through this every year, but that's gone up, obviously.
Copier?
Oh,
Yeah.
copiers.
There's 3 or 4 in there. Now I'm drawing a
Yeah.
blank. So that's just an ongoing. Postage expense, that's pretty much the same. I mean, we're going up $1,000. We are definitely doing things more through mail this year and probably next year with everything that's going on. And tech support, we as you know, there 2 years ago, we had that cyber attack. So we've been trying to be more proactive with that. And so that's why that's up a little bit, just to cover our cost in case something happens too. We want to be covered. Office equipment again is down. We're good with what we have right now. We have purchased a few computers here and there, but right now we're up to date, so we're happy with that. And then the rest of the lines really aren't changing. So it's sort of business as usual in this budget.
Questions for Dave about his department?
Oh, did Brian say something? Gotta get off mute, Brian.
I can't hear Brian.
Hold your space bar down. There you go. Don't let go.
Seth, I do. I think the chairman should get more than everybody else. As in 300 more. And I did find out looked up and found that what the cost of living is, and I think last year we were above it, and I have a problem trying to get that through.
You mean the general raises of 3% are above the cost
Yeah,
of
the cost of living is 1.6. So I know last year we gave raises that were above the cost of living, and the way everything is right now, I'm not sure that's a good thing. We've got, people that aren't getting raises at all, or people that are getting raises of 1% or less, and I have a hard time justifying 3% when that's twice the cost of living.
So we are contractually bound with the union people to do that, just about that, for all of PD and the 2 other folks in the AFSCME union. Just throwing that out there.
I mean, if we're going to start talking salaries, it might be interesting to see some comparatives, because it seems like we have really good workers, and it would be nice to think they were getting paid at a rate that is healthy for their industry, for their positions. And so I guess if you're interested in questioning the raise, the next step for me would be to compare them to other ones.
Do we have the leagues? The league has that comparative survey every year.
I believe it's online now, Seth. They don't send the books out anymore, so you'd have to go to their website, and I'm sure we could download something there.
Do you know, Dave, is it just town managers, or is it also like highway folks and police folks?
Town clerks and
I don't know if it has all employees on it. It might just be like Tim just said, town clerk. I can look though. I'll check it out and see if there's anything there.
Do others have thoughts on on this idea about the general raise and the cost of living. I will say that I think that it's been the board's general practice to try to maintain some equity among the employees so that the folks in the union aren't given a different raise than the folks who aren't in the union. I think that's been kind of an in the background framework that we've been working on. But it's not to say it's the right framework, but I think that that's been what we've been working on. And we've had a number of employees who have voluntarily, of their own will, given up their union membership, which does, I have to say, carry some benefit to the town by not having to negotiate with collective bargaining agents and so forth.
And Brian, I actually appreciate you bringing this up. What would you suggest? What do you think it should be?
I kind of think we need to stay in line with the cost of living.
So the raise should be 1.5%. Is that the number you had?
I had the cost of living of 1.6, and I remember last year that we talked about it after the fact that, I think Doug was the one that brought it up, that what the cost of living was and what we gave, and I thought we were overly generous, and I'm having a hard time with that.
So just in my budget, I mean, I'm a contracted employee, so that's a little different. But the two folks that are in the town admin, the increase is $2,600 for the year. Just to put it into perspective.
That's their 3%, you mean?
That's the 3% for both of them.
Yeah.
Total. It's $2,675.
I think as in a lot of things, it can be helpful to talk about real dollar numbers and not just percents, because the real dollar numbers, I think Dave's trying to illustrate that the real dollar numbers are not huge. And I think also, like in the police budget, I was noticing, it went up $13,000 or something on that order. And it was pretty much entirely in the salaries departments, the chief's salary line and the officer's salary line, that accounts for pretty much the whole increase. And then he found some savings in other lines. And I think Dave's kind of done some similar, that, his department might have had some increase in salary there among looks like there's 3 people included, Dave, in your 2 lines.
Yeah, it's me and Elaine and Jackie.
Elaine, Jackie, yeah. But then you found some savings in other lines that, brought down the overall department to a 2.17%.
I think something to throw out there that puts it into perspective too is, it's not just me that's assumed the role as the public works director. So, Jackie and Elaine are involved with that, which is helpful. Most towns this size have an assistant town manager. I mean, we don't see a need for that. So, there's 3 of us up here, and that's it. And I guess that's my argument. So,
Others with views? Others with some thoughts or questions? Doug, Bailey?
Yeah, I would just say I kind of agree with Dave in the fact that salaries in general, I think we would have to look at across the board. I think it's really hard to give a different figure to the union than the non-union people if they're doing the same kind of jobs. Clearly, people with a contract have to get what's in the contract, but so I think we're kind of dependent on what the union does, and it's hard to penalize the people that came out of the union. So.
Yeah, Tim.
Yeah, I have one more perspective, which is I think useful, is the when times are tough, we expect everybody to tighten their belt and possibly get a smaller raise, or I guess if times were really tough, even to get a pay cut. And it seems like if we came to the end of this budgeting process and we found that we were unable to make it work, we might have to go around and look for ways to save. But it seems like if our budget is healthy and there's room at this point, that this is kind of like banking towards the future, because if we take care of our employees now, in the future, if things get tough, they may help us.
Yeah, Dave.
Just like to add a couple of things, and just off Tim's point too, we decided up here, even when COVID-19 started, to not shut down operations. I haven't skipped a day of work from COVID. We did some alternating schedules with Jackie and Elaine for a very short amount of time. And honestly, even with looking at delinquent taxes, and Jackie and I were just looking at the number last week, and I was astonished at how low it was for this time of the year. So, with the finances coming in, it's really not that bad. And as you know, what I said in the meeting, Monday night, we're going to see some relief through a grant for delinquent sewer and water. So we're really not skipping a beat. And, I think that goes to show how lucky we all are that we have the staff and the employees that we have, that we've just continued to do exactly what we need to do, even in all these times. And I know a lot of towns that shut down, totally shut down. And we never really saw the need to do that. So I think that's important for folks to know.
Barry.
Seth, I totally agree with David right there. I mean, I got a lot of respect for that team and the work that they have done. And I know as a group and as people that are in there every day looking at issues that arise and how to work through them, I'm sure there's savings that come to the town as a result of them being a cohesive group that works well together. So I'm 100% feeling what Dave is sending right here. And I also think that Tim's perspective on let's really wait and see how it all shakes out to the bottom line and see if we really are in a position where we need to be this critical or not.
I think, earlier on in my select board career, I might have been a little bit tougher minded about things of this nature. However, I also want to recognize that they did come, the town employees came a long way toward us with health insurance premiums, which was something that previous boards, this board, had set as a priority, was to get that under control. They came a long way toward us. They're contributing, frankly, more than most other towns around us. The employees are contributing more for their health insurance than most town employees in other towns. And at last year's town meeting, when I was introducing the budget, I talked about how recruitment was an ongoing challenge for the police, especially. The chief mentioned that again tonight, and how we were going to have to, we had gotten the health insurance under control, and we were going to have to shift toward a retention kind of mindset. And I believe that this is a retention kind of mindset. I think a 3% raise is not an unreasonable raise, especially because they're pitching in a lot more than they have in the past toward their health insurance premiums. So I have less appetite this year to be real tight with this. I think that all the points that have been raised about the team, about what they're doing, it's still an attractive job, but it's a real job that they're all doing. We need all these people doing their jobs. We've invested in them in a great deal of training and time, and they've invested in us in a great deal of years of their career in some cases. So I think that from my point of view this year, I think it's warranted, and I'd like to see us be able to make a 3% raise to keep the equity among the town employees this year. Jan.
I like what Barry said. Leave it at 3, and when we get to the bottom line, then maybe look at that item if you feel the increase is too much. But I'm fine with 3.
Other folks or other thoughts? All right, looks good.
Would
Dave?
you like to move to another one, Seth?
Yeah,
Want to go let's do it alphabetically. We'll start with A and end at Z. We'll do the assessor next.
Could you give me 1 second, Dave? I gotta find which one
Sure.
is, because I'm working out of your email.
Okay.
Is it the second?
Let me look. I don't remember.
There it is, the assessor. Yeah, I got it.
You got
Thanks.
it?
Yeah.
We could probably finish it by the time you look at it.
That's why I was worried you did get ahead of me.
It's, as you know, our longtime assessor Dolores, retired here last year. We took an opportunity to look at, really look at some folks to do this job. We did a bunch of interviews, found a person who does this in another town, really felt that this could be done in one day, which has worked out great so far. That Karen, her name is Karen Folger, and she felt that everything she had was adequate. So that our old assessor was here 1.5 to 2 days, so that changed our wages a little bit, where we only had to cover for 1 day. So that's why you see a lot of percentages going down on this, and the overall is minus 7.49%. So there's not a lot here. We just did reappraisal, but we still have to, that's money that comes in and then we just put into an account through the state anyway. So there's really not much here. Property assessor is Nemrick. So that's our Lisa Truchon, who comes in, once or twice a month and helps. We've been contracted with them for a while, so they come in and do all of like the land use things and stuff with Karen, and that's kind of the way it's been for a while. So yeah, I mean, that's what it is. And it worked out okay this year with that. So I'm sure we'll see a little increase there next year, but not much.
Tim.
Yeah, I have a question. If you look at that sheet, and this may come up on other sheets because I noticed this kind of thing. If you look at, for example, property assessor, it's near 2/3 down the page. It says budget FY 2020 was 18,000, and the actual amount we spent that year was $1,200.
Mm-hmm.
And the next year we budgeted 18,000, and this year so far we spent 671.
Yep.
And this following year we're going to budget 18,000. And I guess I'm curious just how to make sense of that. It's
so
like
if you saw the year prior to it, Tim, you would have seen that would have all been paid out because the property assessor wages were included in the reappraisal monies that we had for the reappraisal that we've been doing for the last 2 years. So we were able to use that. And actually, we weren't really sure how that was all going to work either. So this was kind of a surprise until we got through this, that the reappraisal funds paid for the assessors to be here because they were technically just working on the reappraisal.
So you're saying next year we're expecting to actually pay $18,000 to the property assessor?
Yep.
Okay. And is that the same thing with the wages line as well? Because that one was $10,000, 850 wages for budgeted 2020, and then we only paid 1,400, and then
So
the same thing for 21. And so we're actually expecting to spend $9,000 in wages this year, or for this budget year.
Close to it. So another one, there were some stuff that came out of reappraisal, and also our prior assessor was out sick for quite some time too. So that would reflect in that number as well.
Okay.
And also, Tim, for this current actual year, that 18,000, we are going to end up starting to spend some of that money, because pretty soon the assessor invoices will start coming out of that current year budget line instead of coming out of the reappraisal money.
Thanks. Yeah, I guess I just expect the budget and the actual to track more closely, so it kind of, makes sense that we're responding to the actual amounts when we budget the future amount.
Yeah. So one thing too, when we've had some changes like this within a budget, and the budget committee can certainly attest to this for the folks that have been on here for a long time, that when we change department stuff, especially when we have the opportunity to sort of look at it and revamp it, there are some drastic changes that really don't make sense for like 3 years. So, and this is one of them that, we'll see, it'll come out in the wash, I guess, is the best way to say it.
Yep.
I might say this is probably a good opportunity to highlight a suggestion that came in to the select board from someone in town who pays attention, talking about footnotes on sizable differences, lines and things like that. And I know Jan has advocated for that in the past. Some years we've done a great job. Some years we've done an iffy job. I think last year we did a good job. But I think, we might see, I think last year we did it as little numbers, right? And then like something at the end of the budget itself. Wasn't there like a page? I don't have the town report with me, but anyway, those kinds of things. This would be one where I think we clearly owe the public a good note that explains that for the 2 or 3 years right before this, the every 10 years reevaluation was happening. And so, staffing was paid for out of that fund and less out of the operating budget. But like Jackie said, starting now, we're starting to pay it out of the operating budget because the appraisal's over. So that's something to bear in mind. There were a couple of other suggestions that came in, which we can go over. I might just bring some of these in to Dave and Jackie. Some of them are kind of clerical / organizational presentation in nature. And then there's one big one that maybe we can talk about at the end of tonight. But why don't we go ahead, and if there's no more questions on the assessor, let's do the zoning first.
Sure. Another one that's pretty similar. Actually, we handed the zoning numbers to Jeff, and this is what he came back with and said, I don't see the need to change anything. So, except for a couple of things that went down, like travel and expense for the obvious reasons and continuing education for the obvious reasons. The big thing that went up with him was just the postage, which really was $100 that went up. So because we do, I think with the amount of real estate action going on in Brandon, we have certainly seen a bigger move for permits. Obviously folks are home getting things done. It's been a better permit year this year. So we're obviously sending more things out. And if there's a DRB hearing, that's more postage as well. And then legal advertising, that's again, same thing. If we have a DRB hearing, we have to legally advertise it. So we've seen that number go up a little bit with the amount of construction in town. So those to me seem positive increases because of what is going on in the rest of the town.
Well, so I have a similar question with the zoning administration, where we budgeted in 2020 24,000 and we actually spent 17,000. And then in 2021 we budgeted 24,725. And Jackie, do you think we're likely to spend 24,725 this year?
Hold on, mute. That one, Jeff, it kind of really, his hours really fluctuate depending on the number of permits he gets and really how long it takes him and the number of DRB meetings and stuff he ends up
That's
doing.
kind of a buffer that we're putting in there to kind of.
Right, it is really a buffer. I mean, his time is really a fluctuating thing, you know. I mean, some weeks, you know, he's really just here his day and a half, and other weeks he's here, you know, 2.5 days.
Well, and so this brings up, if I can just briefly reference the VLCT article that was in the magazine that was sent to the select board. And one of the things they pointed out is that if you have departments that realize they won't be stuck if something new comes up, they budget more conservatively. And then if something exceptional comes up, they know they'll have money to support them. And I almost wonder if this isn't that kind of thing, because I realize we want to be conservative, but it seems like we're putting in possibly $7,000. And when you think of how many thousands of dollars it takes to make a 1% increase, is it $30,000? Yeah. It starts to become quite a significant buffer. And I'm not suggesting we live near the edge, but I guess I'm suggesting this is one place where if we wanted to be to budget closer to what he used in the past, we might be able to save the town some money, the taxpayer.
So Tim, just another kind of historical one on this, that we went from, it's almost full-time staff zoning administrator to going with our current one for a day and a half. So that's another one of those ones that, 3 years ago, this budget was completely different. And now it's still, it's only, I think Jeff's only been here 2 years. So,
so we're saving a lot of money with him, you mean?
That first hit was quite significant. So yeah, or the first change, I should say. I wouldn't call it a hit, but yeah, that was a huge, and as you see, like, there's no health insurance in this one, or, that's a big savings as well.
And I would counsel against living too close to the edge. And I think that that's kind of where we would be. I think that, as they've said, there might be some volume that requires some more time. And we don't want to ever come up with a deficit in June. Like we want to be in a position where we might have a little bit left over that gets reserved for the next year or goes to the positive fund balance.
Okay.
I think that, the positive fund balance in particular goes a long way toward serving the community better, serving the town better, because as Dave has noted to us many times, sometimes like you just need to pony up a grant match. Things of that nature come up. And it's little things like this where an operational expense could be justified, but if it's not warranted, I think it's still a positive benefit to the town, and it will help us actually to achieve the positive fund balance that the select board set as a policy.
As long as we recognize that that's about a $7,000 buffer. And I'm all for buffers. I mean, I agree. I think it's useful. It's great when we need a match. It's great when we need discretionary money. But it's just nice to recognize that that is a buffer.
So I think another thing too, Tim, that, it's interesting when we go through the budget like this line by line, because ultimately when the budget's approved, it's approved for an entire amount. Like it doesn't go to the voters line by line. So it's really, we put that trust in our department heads to spend within their budget. And if they've got to, like I said, Jeff, whatever, if something's got to be moved around within Jeff's budget to get Jeff to do what he needs to do, we're, as long as Jackie knows what's going on, we're okay with that. And it's sort of just, we take that whole expense and just try to break it down as much as we can to show, 99.9% where everything goes. But there's always those what ifs that pop up. And, Jeff could say tomorrow, I'm done doing zone administrator work here, and then we got to go look for someone that wants $3 more an hour or whatever. So, and that happens. It's happened, fortunately for us lately, it's happened on the flip side, but it's always there. So, I don't think we have a lot of buffers in here anymore. And, $7,000 really, as the whole, is pretty small. So that's my
It's
take on it.
less than a quarter of a point. So this department is also not just zoning, but local health officer is included.
Yes.
Yes. And I did then probably make a mistake that I should have asked you about in your administration budget. So there is a line in the admin budget about animal control expenses that's not funded. Have you met with Margaret yet about the budget?
Nope.
No. Okay. So that might be something that, I suggested that she meet with you and advised her that that your department was the department that included the animal control program. And so because we've taken this early on in the process, maybe I just want to give a little heads up to the budget committee and the rest of the board that it might be that we come back to the administration department at some point later in the budget process after Margaret's met with Dave to see if she has some.
So that's not the wages line, Seth. That's
Right. Yeah, but I mean, there's nothing in there for equipment or, those other kinds of things.
how much more do you think we would need?
Well, I mean, currently it's at 0. I wonder if it should be non-zero.
More than zero, I guess, is the only thing that popped out at me.
Well, we have time to change that if we need.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's all I'm kind of giving a heads up to the rest of the folks. Any further questions on zoning, rental code, health enforcement, all that?
Could I make a comment
Yes, Brad.
regarding Tim's concerns about the reserves in these budgets? I know when I questioned some of the overages on the rec department, and the response I got from the select board was that they look at the bottom line of the budget. They didn't look at it by department. And therefore, these pads, from what I was told, could be moved around to suit whatever need in whatever department. So that would be my concern, because
I don't think that that's accurate, Brent. I don't think anyone has ever told you that the select board only looks at the bottom line. I mean, we've
I have it.
more meetings.
I have it from the minutes. I don't have it with me right now because I wasn't going to bring it up until we got to that department. But I do have those in the minutes, and I'd be happy to send those out to you. That response from the select board. So, but that would be a concern. I mean, I guess in responding to Tim's concern, if that was indeed what was said, if I understood it correctly and read the minutes correctly, I guess you're telling me that is not the case. Don't look at the bottom line of the budget. Departments should stay within their proposed expenses and whatever.
What I'm saying is this. I'm saying that the select board and the budget committee has 8 to 10 hours of meetings where we go through the budget line by line every year before we even pass it. And that does not constitute the select board only looking at the bottom line. I'm also saying that the voters only authorize the bottom line in this town. The voters do not authorize by budget. So in the town manager select board form of government, the town manager has entire discretion as long as he's honoring the collective bargaining agreements that are legally in place with the collective bargaining units. He can move money where it's required for the best benefit of the town of Brandon. That's within departments and that's among departments.
Seth, if I can, I remember Brett asking that question, and I believe it was more directly in rec when he was discussing programs, and that we said he breaks it down by program, and we try to look at what programs the numbers are in programs and whatever, but we don't hold each program specific as long as rec stays within their rec parameters of income and expense. Would that not maybe be where we were at, Brett?
Well, if I'm understanding what was just discussed about zoning and the salaries and the assessor and the salaries, that those pads, whether it's 7,000 or whatever, they could disappear and go to a different department. So they're not, it's all kind of a moving target. I appreciate going line by line, but honestly, as a voting citizen, I do look at the department budgets. I do vote. When I do vote, I'm voting bottom line, yes, but I'm also voting by department, by what I see there.
I think that this way we're using each line to get to the budget, in the bottom line. But if as the year goes on, because we're basically 8 to 10 months away from when we even get to that year, and we never know what things might happen in between. So the budget process looks at it, how we fund each department and what revenue and what expenses they have. However, as we get to that point, if some monies needs to be moved, they can be legally, with the exception of highway, I believe. And I'll let Mr. Atherton respond to that. I think money that's in highway must stay in highway no matter what.
You are correct, Doug. And just to add to that technically we can move money around. It's not, something isn't moved around, just like I don't have access to just hit a button and be like, this is going from this account to that account. Anything that's moved is discussed with Sue Gage and Jackie, and usually the select board. As obviously any expenditure shows up on the warrants every time we have a select board meeting. So there's really, like I said, I don't even have the NEMRIC accounting on my computer, and I shouldn't have. That's why we have a treasurer and a bookkeeper to do that, to go and do that. So that's sort of the checks and balances that are in place.
I appreciate that. Thank you. I'm just, again, responding to the conversation about reserves and things like that, and my understanding of how they can be used.
Some more discussion, more questions, more comments.
And Brent, just to let you know, even if money gets moved, the budget numbers that are in the system never get changed once they're input. The only thing that changes are the actual lines of expenses that are spent.
It's a great point to bear in mind. Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Jackie. So that was the last of the departments that we had looked at doing for tonight. Dave and I had talked and just touched base a little bit about the following meetings. So Dave can correct me, but I think the current plan is that on 11/17, on November 17th, we would be looking to talk with Sue Gage about the clerk's department and Bill Moore about recreation and economic development. Is that right, Dave?
Yeah, that should work fine.
Dave, who usually handles the other governments, like that interdepartmental line? Does that come in? I think Jackie and you, or
yeah, and Sue has some input on that too. But we can do intergovernmental. I mean, those are sort of fixed numbers anyway that we can't really change. So
could she address that when she does her presentation on the 17th?
Okay, we can do that then. Yeah.
And then on Wednesday, November 9th, that would mean well, debt service, I guess, highway and buildings and grounds. And then December 15th would probably then be the, revisions that had to take place because people had additional meetings or thoughts or conversations, and then the kind of big roll up, see where the bottom line, where everything fits together, what kind of budget we've built, and see if it needs some massaging at that point.
So everyone has the town clerk one already. I don't foresee it changing. If it does, we'll certainly send new stuff out, but Jackie and I will get with Bill and we've got a rough draft of his already, so it's not going to take that long to get that, and we'll send it to you as soon as we possibly can, which could be this week.
That would be helpful because Brent's point about the rec department does, it rings a bell to me that we would have been discussing with Bill and about Bill that, within his department, we don't generally see does baseball pay for baseball, but we try to see does programming pay for programming.
Right.
So if Bill, when he comes, right, that's the point at which Jackie does kind of explode that line from programming out into all the details, right?
We can definitely do that if folks want to see that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I think that's been helpful in the past. again, that's not anything that would necessarily be appropriate to throw into the town report. That would be a huge amount of minutiae information that would not be helpful. But in the town report, we generally have presented that in a collapsed format of programming, revenue programming within that department. Other comments or anything else tonight? Announcements, things of that nature? Well, I thank you again, Tony and Jan and Barry and Brent and Jackie and Dave for helping to inform the select board and hearing out the concerns and leading us through. I think it's a great process. As I said in the select board meeting on Monday, you know, that magazine from VLCT that Tim referred to, I think we're very close in Brandon to what is the VLCT model for sound municipal budgeting. And that's good. We probably do have a little room to improve, and we can talk about that as we go along. And we might decide that, no, we've got it just about right. So thanks to all of you. Hope that you have a good week, and we'll see you, is it next Tuesday?
Seth, we do need a motion to adjourn.
Yeah, I have a reliable mover of that motion. He's got his hand up. Okay, so the motion by Mr. Coolidge to adjourn. There's a second from anyone on the board? Tim has a second. Not debatable. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Unanimous at 7:27. Okay, thanks again. See you next week.